Hey everybody, it's Miles. I realized after last week's episode I should probably record some kind of explanation about what I'm doing with these old stories. So last week you probably noticed I released an old story called The Letter that I reworked, rewrote large portions of, wrote new portions for it, and then re-recorded it. And the reason I'm doing that is I've been talking about it on Patreon and on Instagram a little bit. Getting some audience feedback about just this idea I had to redo some old stories that didn't necessarily get the full treatment that they deserved. So, here we are 3 years after I've started the podcast, and I hope I've become a better writer. I know for sure I've got better audio equipment and everything like that. And hopefully I'm a better narrator too. So I just wanted to kind of give some of these older stories a chance to shine. I'm not going to do every single week, for the next few weeks. I'll probably throw in some original stuff here and there to break it up. But I'm doing this to kind of help myself catch up, reconnect with that original sort of energy of the podcast from the early days. And, just kind of to have some fun, freshen things up a little bit in a weird way. So today we're going to be doing a story called The Banshee, which I have revisited, as the title says, and I added quite a bit to that one. It's still fairly short, so I also am going to be re-recording a story called The Drawing. The Drawing, I tried to listen to it for anything that I could add on to or make big changes to, and really I was pretty satisfied with the story in its original state. There were a couple of grammatical things, a couple of honestly very poor sentences that I rewrote just kind of last minute here, but for the most part the drawing is going to be exactly the same as the original. I felt like it was a fun enough little story to justify re-recording now that I've got some better equipment and narrative skills. So today you'll be getting a double story. We'll do The Banshee up front. There'll be a quick ad break in the middle, unless you're listening to this on Patreon, in which case you will not hear any ads, of course. And then we'll go into The Drawing, which is just a re-record of the original story. So I hope you enjoy. Please leave your feedback in the comments, and I will get to reading here. The Banshee. Connor Sutherland stood at the sliding door which led out to the back patio. Dressed in his favorite green polo and khakis, he waited for the ladies to finish getting ready for church. The smell of bacon lingered in the air, tempting him to steal one of the leftover slices out of the refrigerator. Sure, it would be cold, but with a squirt of maple syrup. "Need some coffee to go?" his wife Shelley asked as she entered the kitchen behind him. "Huh? Oh, no, I'm okay. I don't want to be bouncing through the whole sermon," Shelley said. "Suit yourself," and poured the last of the coffee into her travel mug. Out of sight, an engine ripped the quiet open. Crackling and popping, an all-too-familiar red Honda Civic Type R tore by the house, going at least 60 miles per hour in a 20-mile-per-hour zone. "Was that the usual kid?" Shelley asked. "Sure was," Connor replied. "Man, I hope they catch him soon. He's a menace in that thing." Shelley said, "Well, I hope they get him before he kills somebody. I mean, Kendra plays right out there every day." "Speak of the devil," Connor said cheerfully, like he could erase Shelley's implication as their 5-year-old daughter Kendra entered the kitchen. "Why am I the devil?" Kendra asked. Her parents laughed. Connor explained, "It's just an expression," and hugged her close when she joined him in front of the sliding door. The bacon still tempted him, but he felt too much shame to eat a cold strip in front of his wife. He was supposed to be watching his blood pressure. So he just continued staring outside, now with his daughter at his side. "I've never seen her before," Kendra said, pointing. The Sutherlands kept a running tab of all the neighborhood walkers and joggers. Anyone out of the ordinary always piqued their interest, but Connor didn't see anyone outside at all, familiar or not. "Who?" he asked. "That lady way over there. I think she's going to church too. Her dress is really pretty." "Where?" Connor asked. Right there, she's on the sidewalk. Kendra attempted to point the woman out, but Connor still could not see her. Guess it's time to get my eyes checked, he laughed. He patted Kendra on the shoulders. Why don't you get your shoes on? It's just about time to go. Why do you think that lady is sad? Kendra asked later that afternoon, standing in front of the sliding glass door again. What lady? Shelley replied, putting the final touches on a pasta salad in the kitchen. She's over there in Buddy's yard. I saw her before church, too. She's still in her green dress. Who is she, Mommy? Kendra now pointed across their yard toward the Jeffersons, where their little terrier Buddy often played. Shelley followed Kendra's finger, but saw no woman and no green dress. Something slammed into the glass, causing Shelley to shriek and Kendra to stumble backward. A deep, muffled laugh rumbled from the other side of the door. One of Kendra's red rubber balls lolled to a stop on the patio. Oh, you jerk, Shelley scolded Connor as he slid the door open and entered the house with a rack of smoked pork ribs. He continued laughing, and Kendra, recovering quickly, joined in. She forgot all about the wailing woman across the yard. The jovial spirit carried into mealtime as the Sutherland family sat down to eat. Kendra loved Sunday afternoons because her parents always prepared food from a selection of their best dishes. Well after they finished eating, the family remained seated around the table, laughing and teasing each other. At 5 years old, Kendra was still too young and innocent to be troubled by the existential burdens of life, a fact which her parents relished. Kendra's expression changed mid-chuckle, and she turned to face the sliding door. Pushing away from the table, she ran to the glass, pressing her hands and face against it. Oh, Kendra, please don't. I just cleaned that yesterday, Shelley pleaded. But Mommy, I hear her. I think she's in our yard now. Who's in our yard? Connor asked, suddenly curious. He pushed himself away from the table and joined Kendra by the door. He searched the yard, craning his neck to see the difficult angles, then said, I don't see anyone, kiddo. Look harder, Daddy. She's not quite here yet. She's by the fence in a green dress, and she's crying. Why can't you hear her? Connor looked at his wife and shrugged. She was talking about this lady earlier, too, while you were out with the smoker, Shelley replied. I couldn't see anybody. She mentioned her before church, too, didn't you, kiddo? Connor studied his daughter. She had always been an imaginative kid, but he could usually tell when she was pretending. Her eyes sparkled with magic, which was absent now. The carefree little girl he had just eaten supper with was gone. He asked Kendra if she would like to help him clean up the kitchen, hoping to distract her. In minutes, everyone forgot about the alleged woman outside. Or so thought Mr. and Mrs. Sutherland. Kendra frequently glanced through the sliding door, marking the green dress woman's progress. She had almost entered their yard by the time Connor finished washing the last utensil and handed it to Kendra to dry. Kendra wished she could understand why her parents didn't see the strange woman with her wild black hair twirling around her head like she was walking through a black magic breeze. The woman's eyes were hidden beneath the shadow of her hair, but Kendra could sense them watching her. She felt like the woman was trying to tell her something important, and concocted a plan to find out what. When her parents began their nightly routine taking turns in the shower, Kendra carefully and quietly opened the sliding door. The green dress woman stood at the edge of their yard. When Kendra exited the house, the woman raised a pale finger to point at her. She sobbed with a tone a mature person might have discerned as hateful, but to little Kendra, it was simply terrifying. The sobs boiled all around her, causing her to swivel her head in every direction before hurriedly stepping back through the door. After shutting the door and testing the latch, she closed the curtain, guillotining the wailing woman's view of her. She decided not to ask the woman any questions after all. She found her parents in the upstairs bathroom. Shelley was washing her face even though she had just showered, something Kendra never understood. Connor was trimming the edges of his short beard. "I think she's coming here," Kendra told them. "Who is?" Shelley asked, praying her daughter wasn't about to say a woman in a green dress. Kendra whispered, "The woman in the green dress." "Of course." "She's in our yard now, and she pointed at me." "When?" mush-mouthed Connor asked while shoving his jaw to the side. "You weren't outside, were you?" "Only for like a second. Will you please just look out there?" Kendra pleaded. Connor shook out his jaw and said, "No way, Kay. We looked out there earlier. There was no green lady." "Hey," Shelley stated flatly, nudging Connor's elbow. He turned to her. "What? No. Seriously?" "Just take a quick peek to be safe," Shelley said. Connor took a quick, begrudging peek, but only confirmed his own belief. Kendra begged to look outside again herself to try to find out where the woman had gone, but Connor crossed his arms and told her it was time for bed. The next morning, after Shelley left for work, Connor took Kendra outside to draw with chalk on the driveway while he mowed the lawn. The fresh morning reset young Kendra. She made no mention of the sobbing woman in the green dress. Kendra, already quite the young artist, had been working for days on an enormous tree that spanned from the garage to the gutter. Connor made sure to blow his grass clippings away from her so as not to ruin her impressive work. Kendra was almost ready to dub her masterpiece complete. She stood after adding a knot in the trunk and looked the whole thing over. She thought the tree itself looked good, but she hated how abruptly it ended with the driveway. Connor passed by, trailing the scent of fresh-cut grass behind him, and suddenly inspiration struck. Kendra eyed the gutter at the base of the driveway, then picked up her green chalk. "Hey, be careful in the street," Connor shouted over the mower. Kendra acknowledged him as she squatted in the road to complete her picture. "I'm making grass for the bottom," she shouted back. Completely unable to hear what she said, Connor just gave her a thumbs up and a grin, hoping that was the appropriate response. He made a couple more passes as Kendra colored the gutter using only upstrokes to represent blades of grass. "Daddy, look!" Kendra called, this time with a fearful undertone that stole Connor's full attention. He released the mower's handle, letting the machine putter to sleep. His daughter was pointing at the front patio. There, a tall, thin woman in a green dress stood, or hovered, rather, pointing back at Kendra. Her black hair whipped about her face, creating a sort of living veil. Connor could barely make out her small eyes set deep in her pale face. The woman gaped as if silently screaming at Kendra. The muscles in her neck looked tense. Based on nothing but her appearance, Connor thought he should be hearing a maniac scream bellowing from her, but he heard nothing. "Make her stop," Kendra cried. "Can I help you?" Connor nervously asked the woman, carefully positioning himself between her and his daughter. He received no response or reaction. The woman just kept pointing her bony finger, gaping and staring with her pinprick eyes. Connor backed up until he stood right next to Kendra. He did not notice the sound of a turbocharged 2-liter engine approaching. So familiar it blended with the neighborhood ambiance. He grabbed Kendra by the shoulders and told her to go in the house through the garage, never breaking eye contact with the haunting woman on the patio. He realized he should have seen her walk up there, no matter which direction she originally came from. Unless she somehow came through the house, he thought. And if she was Kendra's woman in the green dress, who the little girl claimed had been slowly approaching through the backyard last night, perhaps she had. "You need to leave," Connor demanded. "I'll call the cops if you don't get off my porch and leave my daughter alone." Kendra still had not moved. Connor shoved her up the driveway toward the garage. The woman started shrieking. Connor whipped around. The woman's finger was now pointed at him. A continuous, spiteful wail spontaneously echoed from everywhere, so loudly it almost put Connor on his knees. It was so loud, he could not hear the approaching engine spooling up. He did not hear the horn blare until it was only inches away. The red Civic's rear end lifted as the driver attempted to brake, but he would have needed at least 20 more feet to stop in time. In Connor's last moments, he saw the driver's panicked face, his mouth gaping open the same way the woman in greens had. Then he saw his daughter run inside the garage, safe. And for a second, Connor's last, it seemed the echoing wails were coming from him. The Civic spun out and crashed into a car parked on the opposite side of the street. Kendra tried to run back to her daddy, but a neighbor who had seen everything intercepted her. She nearly tackled the little girl, preventing her from seeing what laid in the road. The wailing had ended. Kendra looked over her shoulder at the patio and saw it was empty. The wailing woman was gone. She has not seen her ever since. The drawing. "Mommy, how do you draw flames?" my son Andrew asked. He was sitting, as he often did, at the dining room table while I made lunch for the two of us. "How do you draw what? Fames?" I asked in return. "No, fames, Mommy. Fames, like fio." Ah, I finally registered what he was saying. Fio was his toddler's adaptation of fire. Flames, honey. It's pronounced flames with an L. La, la. Andrew nodded eagerly and started repeating what sounded more like flames again and again. I smiled. We don't aim for perfection, just to keep getting closer to the goal. "But Mommy, how do you draw them?" He repeated his earlier question. I set down the butter knife and rinsed my hands. Honestly, I had no idea how to draw flames either. I was going to do what I was best at, though. Improvise. I pulled out the chair next to my son's and sat with him. His drawing was crude, but the subject caught me off guard. He had drawn what appeared to be an old-fashioned carriage, top hat-wearing driver and all. A stick-figure horse was harnessed to the black cart. He had given it big, red eyes that gave the animal a real Sleepy Hollow vibe. I was impressed. My son must have seen an image of an old carriage in a show or a book and remembered the details. "This is really good, Andrew," I praised him. "Where did you see one of these?" He looked at me like I had just asked him the color of the sky. It's a low feeling, receiving a condescending look from a young child. "It's the wheel box outside, Mommy." "Wheel box?" I clarified. He nodded and picked up an orange crayon. "I use this for flames." Against my better judgment, I went to the front window. I peeked down the street in both directions, but didn't see any horse-drawn carriages waiting anywhere. I never had. That would definitely be something I'd have remembered. "Looks like the wheel box is gone, kiddo," I said in an attempt to get him talking about what he'd seen. He just shrugged indifferently. "Maybe it took a sweepy person away." "A sleepy person?" I, again, asked just to be sure. I received an exasperated sigh in response. "Yes, Mommy, a sweepy person in a box." My hands felt cold as I processed everything my son was telling me. When I bought the house for us, the realtor told me its history. It was built sometime in the mid-19th century to serve as a halfway home or something like that. Around the turn of the century, it was sold to a mortician who converted it to a funeral home. As creepy as that sounds, I've never been a superstitious person or someone to believe in the paranormal. But what my son was describing to me now, sleepy people in boxes, a black carriage driven by a formally dressed man, well, to call it a coincidence seemed foolish. "How often do you see the wheel box?" I asked him while trying to disguise the worry in my voice. He gave me that look again, the one that made me feel 2 inches tall. "You funny, Mommy. It's there all the time." My heart sank, and I walked back to the table. Was there a chance it really was some wild coincidence? If not, how long had my son been watching ghosts load coffins into a hearse? Why had he never said anything about it? When I sat down next to him, any hope of finding a reasonable explanation escaped me. Around the horse, which I now realized was no stick figure, but rather a skeleton, my little Andrew had drawn his flames. They were surrounding the animal's feet and shooting from its nose and mouth. Humming "Ring Around the Rosie," my little boy added a few final touches to the flames. He set down his crayon and looked up suddenly. "See, Mommy? It's back." I returned to the window, seeing nothing, but believing wholeheartedly my poor, innocent little boy did. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed these reworked versions of these older stories. If you want to hear me talk about the stories themselves, maybe the inspirations behind them, some choices I made with the characters and things like that, feel free to sign up to be a part of The Warned, which is our paid tier on Patreon. If you sign up on Patreon, you get access to a show called Into the Woods that I do every week. It comes out at the same time as the episodes, and it's just me sitting down just like this and breaking down the episode for about half an hour. I also give some insights into where the podcast is at, any updates that are going on there, and I also share some personal updates as well. So if that's interesting to you, check it out, patreon.com/thewarningwoods. It's $4.99 a month, and you get ad-free episodes. You get them early. You get them at midnight on Wednesday instead of noon on Thursday. And you also get the Into the Woods bonus episodes at the same time. So, like I said, check that out at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also follow me on Instagram at thewarningwoods. And check out my website if you want to send me an email or anything like that, thewarningwoods.com. All right, everybody, have a great week.